We'd like to pick up from what Father Gary talked about last week about restoration. There are people who have the gift of being visionaries, in that they can see something that doesn't exist yet, but instead of seeing the present situation, they see potentials. Like somebody would take for example the Sheridan Building. Who remembers the Sheridan Building? Who remembers the Pasig Building? Did you see what they looked like before the work was finished? Did you know, young people, did you know when we moved there for several months, a year or so? We did not have air conditioning in that building. Have you been there for like daily office and the air conditioning was not on? We experienced that on Sundays, except the place was full. Jam-packed, right? And we didn't have walls, we didn't have a ceiling. Place was dirty. The floor was greasy, right? We had a lot of work done, a lot. But you have to have that gift to see the finished product before it's there. And in order to believe that God is in the process of restoring us and we will have a glorious destiny, we must understand that. We must understand, or we must learn to not see the present. We don't walk by sight, we walk by faith. We look forward. We look to the country like Abraham did. We look to a country that doesn't exist yet. We look to a destination, a destiny, a stage of maturity which we're not there yet. And we need to understand we shouldn't be affected by the present situation or the present scenario. And we must understand and hold on to God's promise that this is where we're going. The Israelites were told, I'm taking you to a land flowing with milk and honey. The reason they complained and murmured was because they were looking at the places where they were. Desert, wilderness, no water, no meat, and for 40 years eating the same food, manna. But we are to fix our eyes on Jesus, the New Testament says, and fix our eyes on our goal. I said this Sunday, eyes on the prize. Because if we look at present situation, we will be discouraged, we will be disappointed. And we particularly will talk about restoration of ourselves, us man. There was a heresy in the ancient church, the early church, and I forgot what it was called, but it basically believed that the flesh is just innately evil. Not understanding that the Bible doesn't talk about this flesh when it talks about, most of the time, flesh. It talks about the old nature, which, and I quoted this in my prayer, which Jesus put to death already. The verse is in 2 Corinthians chapter 5. 2 Corinthians chapter 5. It starts at the end of verse 14. Let's start from the beginning. It says, "For the love of Christ controls us, having concluded this, that one, Jesus, died for all, therefore all died." Why did Jesus have to die for us? to crucify our sinful flesh to the cross. And having died, one individual having died, therefore in his death all men died. All men died. Which is why, and it goes on and says, He died for all so that they who live might live no longer for themselves, which was the old life, which they lived for themselves. That died already. But the new life, they live for Him who died and rose again on their behalf. Therefore, which is why, and this is one of my favorite verses in the New Testament, which is why we recognize no one anymore according to the flesh. Because the old flesh, Jesus crucified in His body on the cross already. That flesh died. And when Jesus rose again, we who have died with Him also rose with Him with new life. And that's what we need to recognize, that now that new life, again, is a beginning. Not a perfect life already. It's a beginning, and it grows. And it goes through a process of growth. Hence, restoration again. When God created man in the beginning, again, sin was not there yet. Death was not there yet. But was man perfect? No. He was living his eternal life, but he was just beginning. And sin and death came and process was interrupted. Personally, I believe Jesus just got us back to where we were rudely interrupted, if you may say that, by sin and death. And we have a destiny that we are getting to. I choose to hold on to what God said, to God's promise. What He started, which was a good work in us, He will be faithful to complete it. I'll stop there for now. I'll give you an opportunity because I might take the whole time. Well, yeah, that's what I'm avoiding, being on the road. So just add whatever you want to add.
The flesh was intended by God to be the manifestation of the Spirit, and I think the real struggle of many of all of us is how we can make the flesh in the manner by which the Spirit has been made by God. It's called incarnation. We call that in Christianity. The Word became flesh. It's a continuous process of how can that Word which is in us become and be realized into manifesting that which is now made visible through the flesh. And that's why it takes the acceptance first, I believe, of the understanding or the word that God gives to us. I think it begins with a choice we make every day to be like Mary, to be able to say to God, "Be it done unto me according to your word." That's when the word becomes flesh. That's when there is a beginning of a birth in us that will transform us to the very image of Christ progressively. It doesn't become something that is instant, but it's something that begins a process each day of that transformation, that we begin to be like Christ more and more. And we progressively move and journey into that image that Christ wants us to have in His life. And I believe that when we begin to understand the plan of God in us, we will not let what Paul calls the momentary light afflictions, the things of this age which are temporary and passing away. That's why Paul in another letter said, "We look not at things which are seen, physical eyes, the things which our eyes easily see or our feelings feel. In other words, by the five senses. But we look at things which are unseen, the things which can only be perceived by the Spirit. For the things which are seen are temporary. They are changeable. They are subject to change. The things which are not seen are eternal. That's when we begin to realize the very plan of God in us. That's when we begin to see. And that's the whole process of restoration. It's not something that, as I said, comes in an instant, but it will come as we continually submit our lives to Christ.
The thing about the flesh, what we call, in some translations, like the NIV, it translates flesh many times as sinful desires. It's not always sinful desires, it's just sometimes selfward desires, selfish desires, more probably maybe a better way to understand it. The number one goal of the flesh is to feed itself. That's basically what the flesh wants to do. If it's hungry, it wants to eat. If it's bored, it wants entertainment. If it's lonely, it wants companionship. But the biggest desire of the flesh is to feed itself. Now, in the garden before the fall, that really, you don't see that as an element of life. You see Adam and Eve, and they weren't driven by, themselves. They were there, creatures of pleasure to God, as one of the Psalms says. They were there to bring God pleasure, and they're there to obey Him. And when He said, be fruitful and multiply, that's what they were, motivated by. They were motivated by pleasing the Lord. And you could say feeding their spirits by their fellowship with God. Because it's in fellowship with God, in communion with God, in that relationship with God, that your spirit is fed. And that's what they had in the beginning. And that's what was lost in the fall. And through the fall, man's flesh rose up, primarily in the example of, in the manifestation of, man wants to feed himself. Man wants his own desires fulfilled. Man wants to, when he's hungry, he wants to eat. Maybe not just eat the best, not just eat anything, but, nowadays it's not just eating, it's an art. Eating becomes an art. There never used to be such a word as foodie. Have you noticed? Now on all sorts of postings and blogs and everything, there's this foodie blogs. And all they do is talk about how these different extravagant, marvelous different dishes that they find in different places. And that used to be an issue. If you're hungry, you find something you eat. It didn't have to be fancy. Just fill your stomach. If it's nutritious, that's good. But now man is obsessed with feeding himself in more and more elaborate ways. And entertaining himself in more and more elaborate ways. How did man entertain himself before we invented the iPhone? And all the other tablets and pads and stuff. Because eventually man becomes, as I said, flesh wants to feed itself. Flesh wants to entertain itself. He does all those things. When we come to the Lord, it turns around. When he comes to the Lord, Jesus says, why are you worried about what you're going to eat? Look at the birds. They don't worry about what they're going to eat. But a bird eats several times its weight every day. And God takes care of it. He just flies along with his mouth open and gobbles up all the insects, and he's happy. I don't think I'd like that. But the point is God takes care of us. But when he said, don't be worried about those things, I'll take care of the flesh. In the kingdom of God, the flesh doesn't have to feed the flesh. God takes care of the flesh. He said, you seek first the kingdom. Seek to feed your spirit. And that is what we call restoration of man. Restoration of the state that we had in the garden. If you want to summarize it and put it in a nutshell, I think that's one way to look at it. Restoration of ourselves is going from seeking to feed our flesh to seeking union with God and seeking to feed the Spirit. And not just ours, but those of others. As as our motto says, to know God and to make Him known. That's about feeding the Spirit, ourselves and others. And we see this so much in Jesus. How many times does it say He's moved with compassion? That's what we're missing, I think, a lot of times in the church at large today. The church is so busy, and Christians are so busy, feeding themselves, feeding their desire for entertainment and other things. We forget to be moved with compassion. And that's not an issue with us anymore. But that should be probably the number one desire of a Christian, to be moved with compassion, that we can be motivated to feed not just ourselves, but to see that the needs of others are met. And when we talk about restoration, I think that's what the Lord is working to restore. And the universal church, be a church that works to restore that which is fallen, that which is lost, which is basically our relation with God, to be reconciled with God. And it comes when we have compassion for others. That's a real area that needs restoring in mankind today.
I know what they did before to entertain themselves. They played Angry Birds. And it was better than virtual reality. It was clearer than HD, right? And was hands-on. See, again, recognize we're still in the process of restoration. If we concentrate too much on the imperfections that we see, that have not yet been turned into good or to perfection, then we would be frustrated, we would give up, and we belong to a society that just gives up on a lot of things, replaces a lot of things. We're no longer fixers. And I'm not talking about people at LDO. I'm talking about fixers that who fix things. We now, because obviously also because we can afford it now too. I would think cell phone repair shops would go out of business in a short while. Who repairs toys today? Nobody. You throw them away. We've gone the way of the wealthier nations like Japan and other wealthy nations. When their remote control doesn't work anymore, they throw it along with their TV, throw it away. They buy a new one because they can afford it. Plus, it's out of style anyway. There's a newer model and this and that. That's what happens. No more fixing. Many of you, I'm sure, have seen this picture on the internet, this meme on the internet. Picture of an elderly couple, right? Who were asked, what is your secret to staying together for like 50 years? And they said their answer was, I don't know about you, I don't know about this new generation, but we belong to a generation who fix things. When things are broken, we fix them. We don't throw them away. When relationships are broken, we fix them. We don't walk away. We don't turn our back. We fix them. And our culture, our society does not train us to be fixers. It encourages us to have this mentality: if something's broken, throw it away, replace it. It's cheap anyway. In some cases, many cases, not at all. Just a classic example: car parts, right? You used to be able before to replace several car parts. Now they come in what they call assemblies, like a clutch assembly, like a brake assembly, right? And if one small part in that area is defective, you don't just replace it or fix it, you replace the whole thing. And several factors come in there too. It's man's greed, and you know, it's so designed that you buy something else that you don't really need because they still function, but because of one thing, you need to buy other things that you really don't need. And that's what our culture and our society teaches us now. And that has crept into other things. Like I said, relationships. You know. And people just walking away from things. Not understanding that, hey, people are not dispensable. You know, they're not like things that you can just throw away. They're here to stay. Like for 80 years, they're going to be here. Why is the divorce rate so high now? Because of what I'm talking about. We don't fix things. We just walk away from them. Because it's the easiest thing to do. Plus, to feed our old flesh, what the guy was talking about, feed our old flesh, it would be advantageous to us. Because let's say we've been with the same wife for 10 years or 20 years, and then we take advantage of a misunderstanding, and we this is true in other countries, we file for divorce, thinking, oh, if we go through a divorce, then I can find somebody younger, right? You're older, but you want somebody younger. That's not fair to them, right? But that's been our mentality, because obviously society and we as a church should refuse it. Teaches us something else, something that is not godly. If God did not give up on us when we failed Him, then we should not be giving up on His creation either, or on each other either.
Isn't that attitude really born also related to the attitude of just taking the easy way out? We are a people that cannot handle or are not used to handle conflict. We do not want to wait. We are not people of the seed that waits for the seed to grow. We'd rather go to the store and buy something instant rather than be patient to plant something and then take care of it and let it grow. The culture today is an instant culture, or at least the world today. The flesh wants instant relief. Why is paracetamol very popular today at Biogesic? Because you want something instant. You don't want to fix the problem because it takes a while. You have to endure the pain. You have to try to work through natural ways of remedies. And we don't want that. We'd rather take the shortcut, not go through the trouble, and just want the instant relief immediately. Isn't that also, isn't it already related to people do not want to endure, to suffer, to be inconvenienced? It says, and it boils down to our lack of hope, because restoration is founded on hope. You will not restore anything, you will not try to fix anything if you do not believe that it can be fixed. You will not try to work on a relationship if you find it hopeless. You will not try to heal a cancer if the doctor says it's terminal. Terminal means it's the end. And so today we go through the same mentality. We do not want it because we've lost hope. The hope, the living hope, which is a result of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. That we were born again to that living hope. And I think restoration is founded on hope. Lack of restoration, lack of desire to change something or to fix something is born out of hopelessness. And Today, that's what the world, the flesh, is trying to instill upon us. There's, it's this life only. That's it. So try to make the best out of this life and get the most out of what you can get, and that's it. So we don't see the hope that it has. It's in Hebrews. It says, "Do not throw away your confidence." Hebrews chapter 10. Do not throw away your confidence, which has a great reward. Why can't we restore things? Why can't we fix things? Because we don't have any confidence anymore. We don't see the reward of enduring a relationship. We don't see the reward of and the fulfillment of working at something and then eventually reaping. We want the instant. It says we have need of endurance so that when we have done the will of God, we may receive what was promised. And for yet a little while, he who is coming will come and will not delay. But my righteous one shall live by faith. And if he shrinks back, my soul has no pleasure in him. But we are not of those who shrink back to destruction, but of those who have faith to the preserving the soul. That's restoration. That's working in the area that the flesh may not be yet perfect. I'm going to endure.
One area I believe that God likes, that wants to restore, as He said in the Old Testament, I will restore the tabernacle of David. A mark that He wants to see in His people is a people of praise, people of worship. In Psalm 17, verse the last verse, it says, "As for me, I will behold your face in righteousness. I will be satisfied when I awake in your likeness." We are restored to the very image He made us to be. And that is accomplished actually if we go into Psalm 84, verse 10. "For a day in your courts is better than a thousand outside. I would rather be a doorkeeper in your house, in the house of God, and dwell in the tents than dwell in the tents of wickedness." It comes by in our lives when we desire to be in His presence. That's actually praise and worship. It's a time of communion. It's a time of just being in His presence and worshiping Him. And the beautiful thing about this is that it is applied in any part of our life, even in our daily lives. I mean, this is as practical as you can get. Di ba, na-brand ka mga charismatic, the praise of the Lord people. Kasi our response to situations and issues in life is always a resounding praise to God. Our weapons in our warfare in life is worship. Just like Jehoshaphat, just like Gideon, to them, His mercies endure forever. Whatever we go through, a restoration that comes because we are a people of praise. We are a people of worship. We are a people who desire to always be in His presence. It comes, we today would love to be in the courts of the Lord. I mean, it's actually maraming aspects. When you say being in His courts, it can be the physical court of God. It can also be the presence of the brethren. You desire to be with people of like faith that builds you up and you build them up. It's also when you say the courts of the Lord, it's also spending time with His Word, spending time. That's why the psalmist said, "As for me, I will behold your face in righteousness. I will be satisfied when I am restored to the very image you have called me to be. And that comes to a point of our decision. Lord, may you restore the tabernacle of David in my life. May we be a people of praise. May we be a people of worship. Kasi right now, there's so many distractions. So many forms of entertainment. And I'm not saying it's wrong. It's just that we have masyadong passive ngayon ng ano eh. When worship and praise is coming from the inner being eh. It's not from an outside source like an iPad or it is not there. It's coming from you. You being relating to God. And it is a wonderful experience because it is also a transforming experience. And it's an experience that you use as part of your life, whether you're studying, you're working, all the issues that you are confronted with in life, you begin to see you are being restored. The tabernacle of David is being restored in our lives.
I remember the incident in battle that Israel had, and Moses' hands were lifted up. I remember the song, "Lift up the hands that hang down, lift up the voice now still." How praise and the victory of our lives is related. No? When Moses' hands became weary, Israel lost. And so we see the connection of praise, prayer, our attitude with God. Because sometimes we don't feel God. We don't, there's sometimes we don't feel like praying. We don't feel like going to church. And yet, it is those activities that will usher us into to awaken to righteousness, to as he said in Psalm 17, that will when we come into that presence of the Lord, we see the effect of it. Remember, the chains of Paul and Silas were loosed in the Philippian jailhouse because of praise. There was a praise that just ascended, and like as one said, God so excited with the praise of Paul and Silas, and he began to stamp his feet, thumb his hand as they were singing praise to God. And he saw the earth and caused the earth to shake. Diba? Sabi nga ni Carol King in 1971, "I feel the earth move under my feet." It's the very praise of God's people.
And not only that, I believe that that's the reason why I'm excited about our journey as a church. Kasi we're in the process of building a physical building of our worship. May we be a people restored to be in the tabernacle of David, who will always say, a day in your courts is better than 1,000 outside. Yun ang magiging drawing factor natin. Even though the traffic problem, there are many obstacles kasi, especially in the generations to come. I mean, sabi nga nila, with the traffic situation, it is compounded every day. But see, if we have that attitude restored, a day in your courts, it's better than 1,000 outside. No, as Diana Ross would say, ain't no mountain high enough. Kasi he said, scout. I times as Diana Ross would say. But anyway, really,
as cool in this, we said. No?
we would always want to be in the presence of God. And that is applied in any aspect of our life. That's the beautiful thing about it. With praise is a victorious living. Kasi we feel the situations in our lives knowing that our victory is in Him, in Jesus. And this is in the Lord. Di ba sabi nga niya, a day will come when, people will worship me in spirit and in truth. Kasi that is a reality that starts in yearning for the very presence of God in our lives. So, people, I encourage you to get excited about our journey. Kasi even though there are many things that, are confronting us, we would see the very restoration that God is building. Actually, this has been a prophecy way back in the 80s when our brother Jeffrey Lai said that the restoration of the tabernacle of David will be done in this church. And it is going to be done. I believe na tayo will be, especially the new generation, you will carry the torch to seeing a different kind of people, a people of power, a people of praise. And this being restored, the very tabernacle of David. And it's not just a physical tabernacle. It is a tabernacle in our hearts that can never be taken away, as Jesus said to Mary. So,
Pumbaa and Timon said, Hakuna Matata. What if in the court you had a conflict with your brother? What if the air conditioning in the court was not working? What if the court was damaged or is not in its completed form yet? What if you have to still rebuild first? What if you still have to see the completion of it? I believe one very important factor should be there, and that is what Father Gary said earlier: compassion. Why is God restoring us? Because He loves us enough to not throw us away. He loves us enough to correct us, to fix us. He loves us enough to do that. There should be that in order for us to have a firmer hold on our belief, on our faith toward restoration. So you don't care enough for somebody, you divorce them. You don't make every effort in you to believe that they can be restored and actually work on doing that, right? So that's a very important factor there. It's not just the faith. Okay, one day we will. No, they're backing that faith, powering that faith, should be motivating that faith should be love, compassion. Because without it, I don't think we will get to the restoration that we're looking for.
There is a verse that says we're perfected in love, restored, perfected in love. Like you said, maybe the tabernacle, the courts, maybe not always looking so good. Psalm 84 was written by Korah, some time after David. But David wrote something very similar one time in Psalm 27. One thing I've asked from the Lord, that shall I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord, and to meditate in His temple. Now this was before Solomon built the temple. What David was talking about was a ratty old tent that was more than 500 years old and had been running around through the desert for years and sitting around ignored for years. And it was in pretty bad shape probably. And yet David said, I'd rather stay there for the rest of my life than anything. Because he saw something deeper than just the flash and the pizzazz and the star power and the lasers and all that thing, all that stuff. He saw what was the heart of worship.
The roof was leaking.
Really? There are churches with leaking roofs? Wow. Next thing you'll say there's churches with broken air pumps. But that's, like Richard said, it's compassion that holds us together. That's what we're perfected in. Perfected in love. Restored in love.
If you are a Facebook user, you probably have American friends. You probably have gotten wind of this news about this one Jewish American guy, who died a few days ago, whose name was, and he wasn't a weasel, but his name was Eli Weasel. And this person was a survivor of the Nazi concentration camps in the mid 1940s. I don't know if you've heard of stories of the horrors of the German persecution of the Jews. If you don't know of any of that, maybe you can. You may want to try to get a hold of the movie Schindler's List. That tells it somehow. But the Holocaust was what it was called. This Mr. Weasel, he was 15 when he was orphaned. His whole family was executed, killed by the Germans in the concentration camps. The last surviving family member was his father, and he was also executed just before the Americans came and liberated the Germans from there. But he survived it, and he died at the age of 80-something just a few days ago. And he said, and he's an author also, by the way, a Nobel Prize winner. He said, it's so easy, I'm just rephrasing what he said, it's so easy to lose faith in God and in humanity. He said, I belong to a generation that has often felt abandoned by God and betrayed by mankind. Yet, he said, I believe we must not give up on God and our faith in Him and on man in their restoration. That man is not perfected yet. That we may see right now the horrors, the cruelty, the injustice, the abuse, the evils in man, but we must not give up on them because God is at work in man. He is. And I can assure you, your brothers and sisters at Cathedral of the King have a head start. And they're ahead of the most probably, or many, of humanity. Because God is at work in us. And we must choose between the evils that we see by sight because of the imperfection of man, because they're still in the process of being perfected. And I will quote Mr. Weasel. He said, we must choose between the violence of adults and the smiles of children, between the ugliness of hate and the will to oppose it, between inflicting suffering and humiliation on our fellow man and offering him the solidarity and hope he deserves. We can do that, or we can choose to just give up on them. And he said, I know, I can speak from experience, that even in darkness it is possible to create light and encourage compassion. I still choose to believe in man in spite of man, in spite of his weaknesses. Seeing the God at work in them, seeing the seed. And this is also what I'm talking about. The seed has potential. The smallest seed, the mustard seed, has potential. In us as a church, that seed has been planted a long time ago. And so far it has somehow, no matter how slow, somehow it has already produced some fruit. It has already gone through some growth. And so the potential is multiplied than when it was in the beginning. So we have gained ground somehow. We've gotten somewhere somehow. And this is not the time to give up. This is not the time to focus more on the weakness rather than the potential. And God is the potential in each of us. And so we are not to give up. We are to see the work of God in us. We don't look at each other according to the flesh, but according to the Christ who lives in us. Because if you look at people's abilities, then you will get disappointed. This also explains to us, to you, visually, to see the priests in black vestments, black cassocks, but over it a white surplice. Because he's being restored. And one day, along with martyrs and other saints, they will be just wearing white robes. No more black cassocks. It should be cooler, by the way. But that's our destiny. And we fix our hope on that. Not, we don't walk by sight, we walk by faith. We hold on to the promise of God. I want you to look right now at the person around, the people around you. Look at them as people in the process of being perfected. I can, and you can, and they can enumerate their weaknesses. But each of us has something in common, someone in common. God is at work in us. And He is in the process, in the business, He's very busy in this business of restoring us.